There's nobody else there.
Boom, boom.
Oh, great. Good morning and welcome to another edition of the Digital Download. Today, we're going to talk about mindset. It's our accomplishments that have propelled us to where we are today. But operating at our best all the time is hard, and sometimes it can lead to burnout. This week on the Digital Download, we'll have a special guest, Sarah Milby. We'll talk with Sarah about achieving and sustaining peak performance and how mindset is the key. But before we bring Sarah on, let's go around and introduce everyone. While we're doing that, let's have the audience reach out to a friend, ping them, and have them join us. We strive to make this a highly interactive experience, so audience participation is encouraged. Right, so introductions. Adam, would you please kick us off?
Hi, I'm Adam Gray. I'm co-founder of DLA Ignite. And Rob, you said the digital download, but you didn't say what the digital download was, did you?
No, I did not. Thank you for joining us on the Digital Download, the longest running weekly business talk show on LinkedIn Live. Thanks, Adam. Tracy.
Hello, everyone. I am Tracy Borison, founder of TLB Coaching and Events, proud partner of DLA Ignite, and our Canadian representation on the panel.
Ooh. Welcome, Tracy. William.
Thanks, Rob. Yeah, no, I'm William Shorten. So I'm an associate with DLA Ignite, along with Adam. And I also run my own consultancy, William Shorten Learning Solutions. So I'm a consultant, facilitator, and business coach.
Excellent. Thank you. Lenwood.
Good morning. My name is Lenwood Ross. I'm the founder and CEO of Accelerate, and I. We're both located just outside of New York City.
The royal we.
Exactly. We're located outside of New York City. We help people get work done faster, and we are partners of DLA Ignite.
Excellent. Thank you. Jordan.
Hello, I'm Jordan Abbott, B2B Social Influence and Interaction Advisor at Supero, and of course, proud DLA Ignite partner.
And a representative from
France, Paris.
Oh, oui, oui.
Très bien, Glenwood.
Sorry.
Jensen.
Hi all, I'm Jensen. I work at Supero, and I am a proud DLA associate working from Leighton Buzzard.
Working from where?
Leighton Buzzard.
You're not familiar, Rob?
That sounds like something the cat dragged in.
You've been there.
Excellent. Welcome, Jensen. Alex.
Hello, folks. Alex Abbott, founder of Supero, and we are also, as Jordan and Jensen have said, a proud DLA Ignite partner.
Excellent. Welcome. Thank you, Alex. And myself, I'm Rob Durant, founder of Flywheel Results. We provide staffing, training, and consulting services to tech startups. So let's bring on our guest, Sarah. Good morning and welcome.
Well, good morning and thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
Great to be here.
If you don't mind, I'll share a little background about you for our audience. Competitive athlete turned CEO, Sarah wanted to motivate people, but not have them burn out. As a college athlete, in addition to her technical coaches, she also learned from a coach who was focused on mindset. She was taught strategies to handle pressure, see opportunities in challenging situations, and prepare for future successes. Now she and her team help others do this through her company, Valor Performance. Sarah, please tell us a little bit more about you and how you got here.
Sure. You started right where I would have, which is as an athlete. I played competitive soccer. I then got into competitive running, and I was fortunate enough to have a mental skills coach. At the time, it was a little bizarre, but I saw it as just an additional tool in my toolkit and a competitive advantage. So I had, as you mentioned, the technical coaches who worked with me, especially in soccer, dribbling and shooting. But I had Paul, who was my coach, who worked with me on my mental skills, especially as competition was rising. How was I going to continue to step up mentally, emotionally, and make sure that all of the work that I had done for physical preparation could be maximized? And how it then leapt into many, many years later, Valor Performance, was I then went on into my career post-college, working in all different sectors, nonprofit, government, finance. And then I found my way into startups and technology companies. And I found as I worked my way into leadership roles that the same issues kept coming up for myself and my teams. How do you see opportunities and challenge? How do you make sure that you're positioning yourself to be primed and optimal mentally and emotionally as you go to execute on whatever the strategy, methodology, process is of your work? And I kept hearkening back to Paul. And I kept wishing that my team had access to a Paul in a scalable way. And then it started to just slowly plant the seeds for when I took the act of courage, hence valor, heroic courage. I'm sort of obsessed with courage. In just seeing what would happen if I tried to create a scalable, technology-driven approach to giving people access to some of these best practices and having a coach in their corner. So we do leverage a lot of performance psychology, but we apply it into corporate and increasingly actually now into healthcare, which we're really excited about. So that's a little bit more of connecting the dots, a lot of zigging and zagging, but now I have the privilege of running this company, Valor.
Awesome. Thank you for that. I want to pick up on that word courage. As you know, it takes courage to keep growing, to up-level your skills, to continue to improve and develop throughout your career. And it takes courage for organizations to see the potential that the future holds for its people. So we've asked you to come on the show and give us some insight on how we can use mindset to help us find that courage. But first, what is meant by mindset, and how can that help me?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's all about how you're viewing and reacting and responding to your environment. And we all have internal chatter. Whether you have the awareness of it or not is another question. But we all have the potential to hold ourselves back or propel ourselves forward by what we tell ourselves in our minds. And mindset is really what gives you some power and acknowledgement of the power that you can choose different thoughts. And the thoughts that you choose is very tied to then your emotions and your behaviors, which is of course very tied to your interactions with other people and your connections with other people. You know, many times people in our space will talk about leadership development, meaning how do you manage other people? How do you talk to other people? Communication. Yes, 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 that's all critical. But sometimes we've underinvested in how we talk to ourselves as the starting point, and how that is so tied to then how we communicate and interact with others. So mindset is bringing that back. And we have a strong approach at Valor where how you lead yourself is then a building block to how you lead and connect with others, which is critical as you lead during times of change. And so I love mindset, and I love how you connected in that question to courage, because we all have the courage to potentially reframe something a little differently and to see it in a different way, or at least consider seeing it in a different way as we navigate our day-to-day environment.
Tracy, I saw you nodding along.
Yes, I have. So I have this question that I ask myself when I'm feeling like my energy is shifting in a downward way, whether I'm thinking empowering thoughts or I'm thinking disempowering thoughts. And one of the things that I found really interesting on the things I've learned about like brain science over the last couple of years is the amount of subconscious thoughts that we can process that don't become conscious thoughts. And because I think it's something crazy, like 4,000 thoughts a second, but you can only process 90 or something like that. Like it's a drastic difference. And so one of the things that has been like really helpful for me is just being able to just take a step back and say, okay, is what I'm thinking helping me right now?
Yes.
It might be true, right? It might be about a situation, but if you can shift that to be like, okay, this is the situation. This is my disempowering thought about the situation. How might I be able to find a empowering thought about the situation that can help me, help my team? But one of the things I really wanted to put out to Sarah and the panel is I had an experience in leadership where let me paint a picture for a moment, because to me it's a picture. So there's my team, and my team lives on this beautiful tropical island with sun and the beach and beverages, and it's beautiful and it's nice to be there.
Can I be in your team?
And then there's this wall that goes, this like big castle wall that goes around the whole outside of it. And there's these really stormy seas on the outside of the wall. So the wall is there to protect from these stormy seas, and also dragons. So there's like dragons trying to attack this island. And then there's Tracy with my armor and my sword, and I'm out fighting dragons so that my team can live in this like peaceful, sunny environment that feels good and is supportive of them and all of those things. And when I look at that now, that seemed like something I had to do. Like literally, I felt like I was defending my team from the rest of the company. And I didn't want the like corporate culture to permeate my team because I didn't like it. It wasn't supportive to me. And so I fought it off really aggressively. And then when I think about how that contributes, which I don't think it does, to peak performance of our leaders, then we have like this really big break point in an organization. So Sarah, I wanted to ask, and like all the other panel members too, like if that's something you've witnessed, if that's something you felt yourself, and what are some things that have worked for you to navigate out of that situation?
Oh, yes, I have thoughts. I'm curious the other panel, though, because I'll just start rolling.
I can tell you from... Oh, go ahead, Alex.
No, I'm just throwing a flippant comment out there. A flamethrower might help you fend off the dragon, Tracy.
I can tell you
and it
from
would be
a
helpful
sales leader
to have peeps that are recommending those types of things for you instead of old school swords, like broadsword, no less.
Well, it's an interesting picture, and you know what I was thinking about while you were describing it is how, and I don't know the answer. So you know, I'm just raising another question. Is I don't know how helpful it is actually for your well-being or your team, right? For you to be out solo fighting dragons. And I wonder whether it might be more effective for the whole team to be embracing the challenges and complexity of the environment that you're working in. So, that'd be kind of my question is that, what is the best approach to the challenges that we face, whether those challenges be external, challenges that are out in the market, or internal challenges that we need to overcome in our organizations?
I think a big problem that we have here is that we are all islands. We've got a singular viewpoint and a singular experience of this stuff. So I've worked for bosses that have said, we have a problem, by which they mean you have a problem, and the problem is this. And equally, I've worked for bosses that have said, you don't have any problems, you just get on with what you're doing. I will deal with all of this. I will fly air cover for you to make sure you can excel at what it is that you do. And that's a lovely environment to work in, but I'm not sure that necessarily makes it more successful or not. And I think from the leader's perspective, like you were saying, Tracy, you're swinging your broadsword and fending off dragons, and that's a really tiring thing, isn't it? But I always think from an individual perspective, whether you're a leader or not, it's very easy to get embroiled in the interaction that you're currently having. So, you're sitting opposite somebody, they say something that you don't like, or they say something that you don't agree with, or they say something that is not part of your execution plan of what it is that you're going to do. And the natural response is to meet that head on. The natural response is to fight that battle rather than taking a step back and looking at yourself and the person having the interaction and say, okay, what am I hoping to achieve with this interaction? Because, if I win the argument, but turn you off as a champion of mine or make you resistant to the change, then I may well have won that battle, but I'm going to lose the war. So I think that certainly in my experience, which is limited compared to yours, Sarah, certainly my experience of this is that we have to have a strategic view of what it is that we're doing. And, is this interaction and is this task I'm doing contributing towards the long game, or am I getting embroiled in the arrogance of winning this individual fight?
I guess I'd ask a follow-up question, Tracy, and thank you for sharing, because it's really vivid images of what you were talking about there and very strong metaphor. You said it was a team that you managed in the past. What was the defining factor in the end that made you leave that organization or that situation?
So the dragons were my CEO. And not that she was a dragon or mean or any of those things. Like, in lots of ways, she was very supportive and critical to my growth, to where I got as a person. But it was just that we were very misaligned in how we saw success, how one of the things that's most important to me is the empowerment of the people, human optimization, right? Doing things that work for individuals and not just this very transactional, here's the business stats, right? We execute on business stats, and however people experience it. That's not how I do things. And so what I realized is that we were just very misaligned, and I ended up leaving the organization. Not mad. It's just that this isn't the place for me. And I would like Lenwood was saying, if I'm not saying we never have to fight dragons, right? But when we do have to fight dragons, how successful is one person fighting a dragon versus a team of people fighting a dragon? And I just didn't feel like I had a team of people on the management team that wanted to go fight dragons with me. So now I come to the digital download and hang out with people who will fight dragons with me.
Adam, that air cover is exactly how I felt when I was a leader in sales. My job was to keep anything that could detract the frontline salespeople from closing one more deal. But Tracy, what I didn't realize until you said it earlier was that I was also protecting them from the company's culture, where I didn't feel that it was aligned with me or my team. Sarah, you said you had some thoughts.
Yes,
What
well,
are
I
you
think,
thinking?
and I hope I'm not frozen. So I think I might have frozen there for a bit, but hopefully you can hear me okay.
Hear you loud and
I
clear.
think, okay, great. I think we have to discuss values in this conversation as it relates to being such a strong pillar to creating culture. It's very normal for an organization to have micro cultures. So a team has a culture within a broader organization, which has a culture, which, by the way, every organization has a culture. Whether they have intentionally created it is another question. And part of that intentionality is having to do, oh, there's a slight time lag. Sorry about that. Having to do with the values that you set. As a leader, you can foster those conversations for a team to be empowered in how they want to show up in the day-to-day. The values that then drive the processes, the actions, and the interactions across the team. And we see it all the time where a leader and maybe their team have values that are different from the broader organization. And there are some situations where you can navigate that. You can control the controllables. There's so many different types of dragons, right? There's so many different types. It could be an individual. It could be an internal situation or change. It could be a competitor. It could be external change that we all have seen time and time again, especially over the past few years. So how do you navigate that change? Do you see the opportunity, or is it debilitating? And I think that's something that's going to be dependent on the situation. But what I love about this conversation is almost everybody acknowledged that you need to take a step back. Tracy, you even used that in your language. Sometimes I can take a step back and I can see this broader point. And I think just that, being able to see the bigger picture, can help inform how do you show up to that situation. And whether it's going with which type of sword or rallying the troops and say, hey, this is what we are facing. How do we want to come together in this moment?
I love that we've landed on the dragon metaphors. Len,
we-
before you go, I want to acknowledge the question from our audience. Sarah Filipiak asks, curious, Sarah, how you're aligning microcultures within a larger organizational culture. Is there ever friction between microculture dynamics and the entity at large? Easy for me to say, right?
Of course, Sarah, and I'd love to hear your experience with this. But of course, on this latter one, that there can be friction. I mean, almost everybody was nodding when I said just that comment about microcultures. It seems like that definitely struck a chord. I'm curious what the other panelists think. But you're 100% right, Sarah, that there can be friction between a microculture. And sometimes those microcultures, in a beautiful way, can come together to create the fabric of a great organizational culture. But how are they aligning needs to be intentional. And so, and by the way, we see this, we're a globally distributed company. So we see this also culturally, and celebrating the individual cultures of certain regions, teams, and bringing them together in a unified organizational culture with values. So all of these things need to be intentional and deliberate conversations. What we find in our work and in our coaching, we talked a lot about mindset. Obviously, that's our bread and butter. But not being able to have those conversations is something we've seen over and over again, of just not knowing how to navigate the conversation to say, hey, we say this is our value. What does that mean to us? How do you think we should show up in these various situations if XYZ is one of our values? And by the way, is that still one of our values at this time for our organization? Or is it looking different for how we want to show up right now?
Yeah, this is a really awesome conversation. And I would like to respond to what you said about the microcultures, because I have seen that. I've seen that play out in a way that is extremely destructive in an organization. And I think that it is emblematic, or maybe even that's really a bad word. It is a byproduct of the hierarchical nature of organizations, that kind of grew up in the 20th century, that the hierarchical structure was good for efficiency and even effectiveness, but it's not so great for the modern age, which is moves much faster and requires much more agility and adaptability. So this actually happens to be an area of focus for me. But when it comes to taking a step back and really being able to kind of assess those things in the organization, for me, when I started doing that, that's when things changed. I was a horrible leader at one time. I mean, absolutely terrible leader.
No, we can't believe that, Glenwood.
You being sarcastic. Anyway,
He said was.
Yeah, I was really horrible. But
why was that? Is that because you were young and inexperienced, or because you had specific pressures on you? Because I think that, I was kind of, obviously my comment was a funny comment, but the fact is that you are a really nice guy. I mean, a really nice guy, and yet you identified, looking back with hindsight, that you were a horrible leader. So what drove you to be a horrible leader? Because that's out of character for you, isn't it?
Yeah. So it was youth and inexperience. Okay. So that there was that combination, but really when the pressure of the job started to weigh down on me without having any tools in my toolbox to handle it, then the flaws in my character started to appear. There started to be just sort of like, if you have character flaws, as we all do, but if there's significant character flaws, imagine kind of a wall, and there's cracks at the bottom. When you start putting pressure on that wall, those cracks will start to spread, and eventually there'll be a breakdown in the wall. So basically what happened is, there was a tremendous amount of, this was an extremely high pressure situation. There's not character, I was the level below the C level. Our CEO was under investigation. My boss, the general counsel, was under investigation. And when I say investigation, it was like the FBI, the Securities and Exchange Commission, Banking Committee of the United States Congress. I mean, this is serious stuff. And so the pressure on me in that situation as the senior corporate attorney for the organization was significant. And I didn't have awareness about, number one, my position in the organization and how people saw me. And so because of that lack of self-awareness, I was like a person who was like, it's all about the job. I've got all these things I've got to manage between the board and outside counsel and all these different things. I just didn't appreciate what people were seeing and what other people were going through in the organization. So we have an organization that's under pressure, and I was like focused on myself, like I've got all this pressure on me, but it was really the whole organization, all the people in the organization, even all the way down to the executive assistants who are supporting the executives they work for and feeling that pressure on them. Right. Yeah. So I just I had no awareness and so, my actions, which were tough and very legalistic, because I'm a lawyer, I didn't appreciate, the impact of my actions. And so anyway, what I was getting at was like this issue of self-awareness and leading yourself first, right? And just taking that beat and saying, you know, one of the things that I did for a period of 2 years after I realized, oh my goodness, I'm a horrible leader. And I got to get this under control is I stopped speaking first, or not speaking first. I would just, anytime I was having an interaction with anyone, I just would not respond in that moment. If I could say that, you know, I would just say, you know, let me just take a minute. let me get back to you. Let me, you know, and just take time to process what was happening, how that person might be feeling about it, and the impact it might be having on the organization.
Lenwood, for that organization that you were working in, what were the espoused values or the kind of mission that organization had?
That's a great question. I can tell you the mission, but I can't necessarily speak to the values because I don't remember what they were, or even if they were articulated. It was articulated in a, you know, for the proxy statement. It was, you know, it was something that was just a piece of paper. It wasn't something that was necessarily, you know, spread across the organization. But the mission was to make the very best accessible to all children, and that was something that I still remember that, even though it's been years since I worked for that company. I loved that mission. I worked for a founder-led organization, a visionary entrepreneur who is, you know, he's still out there doing his thing today. That is what the values around making the very best accessible to all children is what attracted me to the company and motivated me to go to work every day. We then had some managers who were Wall Street types who came into the organization. The conflict between those two ways of operating nearly destroyed the company.
Sarah,
I feel
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, go. No, I was just going to say, I feel so strongly to jump in just with the sentence around I was a terrible manager. I feel like protective. I have to jump in and just tell you how common this is. And like we as humans, there's the neuroscience to support how we react to stress and the pressure that you described and what it means for our own self-regulation. And how when we aren't equipped, and I liked how you said, I wasn't given the skills. That's so common. How many times in organizations do we promote into management really strong individual contributors, but not support them with proper training, development, and support? And what I'm on a mission to do is encourage that part of that training and support is the ability to lead themselves as we then are asking them to lead others.
Yeah.
And equip them with some of the mental skills and the mindset and some of the stress regulation and emotional regulation. We call it emotional flexibility, because stress is not bad. We can reframe stress if we have the skills, the tools to reframe mentally, to say, okay, gosh, this is a normal physiological response that I'm having. Gosh, I must be also excited about this opportunity, and I'm feeling this pressure. Maybe I have some fear about what if I don't perform. But if we don't ever have those conversations, then we're just leaving these unsupported leaders to have that ripple effect. And that's why what's so interesting about our work now is we're correlating, we're seeing, man, if you invest in top talent, it actually does have an impact on the overall team engagement, team performance, not just of that individual, but it's across the organization. So anyway, I had to jump in with your story, and I appreciate you sharing it, because we often are coaching people who, I'm always surprised that there still are people out there that have fixed mindsets, but there are that just say, I've solved it all. You can't teach me anything. I am the way I am.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody on this call, but so I
No,
just
no, but
appreciate the
I have
acknowledgement that we're
felt it
all
all
works
this
in
time.
progress. Oh, you have. Okay, that's right. Oh, so finally, I've met someone. Okay, there we go.
I think
Right
that's
here on digital download.
Sarah,
I finally have met the person who has it all figured out.
don't you think that's still the fixed mindset is still the prevalent mindset in
Yes.
corporate America? For
I
sure.
bought the book. Doesn't that count?
Yeah,
And they bought the book and
totally.
they just put it to their head and they hope that the information was just
Yeah, it's just on the bookcase, and that counts.
Oh, I didn't read all of
I don't.
these.
I've got the book.
I don't think any leadership is lifelong learning. Like so much of, I mean, you're always learning and growing. We were talking about the dragons. I'm going to keep referencing dragons. Tracy, thank you for this analogy.
Valor and dragons somehow go together.
Right. Right. You know, situations are constantly changing. And so therefore we as leaders, I often think about like Sarah 1.0 wouldn't have started Valor. Sarah 2.0 started Valor. Scaling Valor is requiring Sarah 3.0. We are all in a state of evolution. It just, in order to maintain performance, you're in a state of evolution. What, you know, and Rob, you asked me this one time earlier, is like what, you know, got you here is not going to be what gets you there. And we just have to kind of like hold some of our practices, routines, mindsets loosely, and at least be thoughtful and intentional about them if we want to sustain peak performance.
Yeah.
So what got you here isn't going to get you there. When do you know it's time to switch?
Sorry, I'm chuckling at Digital Download meets Dungeons and Dragons. Gosh, don't you think that we all benefit from a little bit of the introspection and just asking ourselves that question? You know, it's never black and white to say, okay, so if you face this, then you clearly, you know, you switch. I like to think of my own performance routines as experiments to consider or to try, right? Because my situation, not only with my organization that I talked about, but also we faced, you know, the pandemic. I became a mom. Like situations are constantly needing to just say, okay, is this working for me? I personally, not to get into like specifics, but I have a weekly review at the end of each week just to take 30, 45 minutes to review my my schedule as far as how it aligned with my priorities, dare I say values, and then consider if I need to tweak anything or consider tweaking something, not to put so much pressure on myself, but just to say anything I want to adjust, anything I definitely want to take with me into the next week or into the next month. I like to think of periodization. This is something a lot of elite athletes do. We work with elite athletes, elite military leaders, corporate executives, sales teams, healthcare. So a lot of our coaches understand the routines across these different performance arenas. And I like to think about periodization, right? So let me give an example. As a marathon runner, there's such thing as a taper right before I run the race. Sometimes you have a build-up phase. And so I think we can all as humans benefit from some periods, chapters, if you will, seasons of our life, and allow ourselves to have different goals for different seasons or different chapters. Use whatever phrase. I'm trying to bring it back to dragons. I haven't come up with something yet. Give me a second. We'll have some way that it goes back to dragons.
I think there's also a word that both you, Sarah, and Len would have used, which is around kind of awareness. And I think, you know, that's a critical phase of understanding. Actually, as you kind of mature and get into leadership, it's understanding, you know, where your strengths lie. Sometimes some of the underdeveloped strengths you have, which you can use even more, and those areas which either you avoid or, you know, need some development. So I think it's that basis to kind of work and to build on those, and then of course, as you said, the self-reflection, and of course, you know, the reflection of others, which you can get through feedback, you know, and that's why so many organizations these days are talking about establishing feedback cultures, is because they want to kind of almost put this to act as a catalyst to kind of get this moving throughout the organization.
The most important word you said there, Will, was maturity. So I've been listening to the conversations here, and you know, Lenwood's issue when he was a horrible manager had nothing to do with the fact that he was a horrible manager. It had to do with the fact that he wasn't mature. And I think that one of the things that I have seen universally across organizations is that the best managers have been mature people. Now, often that aligns with age, not always, but often it aligns with age. But as you mature, you become much braver about taking criticism and acknowledging your weaknesses. So when we all set out in the workplace, we think we have to be best at absolutely everything. We think it's a competition. And the idea of saying, actually, Will, can you do that because you're much better at it? You'd never utter those words. You'd just say, yeah, give it to me, I'll do that. I'll need to be better than you. And as you get older, you realize that actually the greatest value you can add is this little stripe here, and an understanding of those things, but not doing those things necessarily. And part of that is the open mindset, and part of that is recognizing that you have a uniqueness to you, and it's that is your USP, and you don't have to be able to do everything, and that only comes with experience and with maturity. And when I've seen catastrophic management, it's invariably been because people have been promoted too fast, too far, too soon. And they're not inherently bad people, but they behave inherently badly when they're put in that situation, a situation where they have, as you said, no training, no experience, no toolkit, or no tools in the kit bag that they can deploy when these problems arise. And they're afraid to put their hand up and say, you know, actually, I'm lost. Can somebody please help me because I'm in this situation? And that bravery, back to broadsword and dragons, that bravery and that ability to vanquish those demons are all internal, aren't they? You know, it's about saying, I need your help with this, Will. I need your help with this, Lenwood. And that only comes when you're secure enough to be able to say, yeah, I'm not good at everything.
I want to acknowledge some of the comments from the audience. Sean Matten says, not all managers are good leaders. Leadership can be taught, but values such as integrity and kindness are critical. And then this other fellow commented, this Timothy Hughes, there was a fixed mindset pandemic in business. And I know people who say they have growth mindset, but are very fixed.
Well, and I think that goes back to the self-awareness piece, right? I mean, I have this conversation often about the concept of authenticity, right? Because I feel like peak performance, authenticity evolves, right? So if you're going to stay peak, you have to evolve. Authenticity evolves. This is the human experience. And one of the things that I think is so, like, as you have time as an individual human to explore what is my thing that I'm good at, how can I find that? There's like very little in the societal narrative that's about that, right? So businesses end up, they might have a certain amount of values on the wall and they might think that they believe them. But then, Lenwood, one of the things I was hearing in your experience is that like leaders need to make fast decisions, right? Like, and if that could be a way a business is run, right? Like leaders are expected to make fast decisions. And when you don't have the space to step back, which we've all talked about is necessary to manage yourself, let alone manage someone else in those perspectives, we can't do that. And so we need to be able to challenge those societal narratives. And we're living in a world of instant gratification, right? And it's transitioned over into leadership. I want instant gratification, instant decisions from my leaders. And that doesn't allow a leader to be the leader that they can be, to maintain peak performance with the team. And similarly, in that conversation about self-awareness, where do we get taught self-awareness? Right? We don't get taught it in school. I didn't learn it in business school, that's for sure. I never had, like, although I had people I would consider really great managers, nobody had the conversation with me about, like, what do I believe? What do I think? What do I think my gifts are, right? The practice of self-awareness isn't part of the education system. It's not part of the narrative in most businesses. And so then how can we possibly find it unless we've taken the time personally as an individual over X amount of years, which is why the maturity is relevant, to learn those things about ourselves.
Yeah.
Or you have a coach to help supercharge you, I feel the need to say.
Yeah,
or
yeah.
you have a coach. I mean,
There we
seriously,
go.
you have to have sometimes that partner, because to Rob's point, yeah, let me send you the 50 million books that then you have to read and then jot down some journaling and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, that's for sure. And many people do that. And a lot of other people may need a partner in this experience, this discovery process too, of self-awareness. And to your point, Tracy, this is why I started this business. Like post-industrial revolution, to go back to Leonard, is like we have focused our modern workforce so much on the efficiency and effectiveness. We've squeezed out the humanity. And then why is anybody surprised when then we say, gosh, we really need stronger leaders and they need self-awareness. Wait a second. We've created this modern workforce. Okay. I can get off on many tangents on this, but therefore it behooves all of us, and especially those in leadership positions, to encourage people to have taking a step back so they can be intentional. And as leaders, we can model it.
And I'm
Because
biased,
many people's schedules are just full of meetings. Sorry, William, I have to just continue my little soapbox. It's just we're going from meeting to meeting to meeting, and then we're saying, and by the way, at some point you should have this time to reflect.
Meditate in between the meetings.
Right.
Yeah, right. There you go.
So picking up on that,
I was only
scratching
gonna
that
say,
a little bit. Go ahead, William.
There is a bias, and I know working in a similar space is you're seeing a lot of organizations now taking on external coaches, and you're also seeing a lot of them beginning to invest. One of the favorite programs going around at the moment is Leader as a Coach. So they're trying to get these leaders to bring these skills on board. You know, to a certain extent, the issue is that they haven't gone through that journey necessarily themselves, and therefore, you know, they don't they're not aware, if you like, to come back to that of what they need to be doing and how they're getting the how, but not the what and the why.
Yeah. Shouldn't it therefore be the responsibility of the leader, the hiring manager, whoever promotes you, to make sure you have the environment available to you to be successful?
And in the past, I think, and I was really lucky with the bosses that I've worked for, is that a lot of them had a kind of inherent mentoring kind of approach. So they actually took time. My first sales role, I was working for somebody who was an experienced sales manager, and they took time to take me through the kind of different processes, to talk about how you needed to turn up, you know, some of the kind of financial commercial relationships in different parts of the world, because we were dealing with customers on a global basis. So I was very lucky to have those kind of people. And I think, you know, it's one of those, if as a leader, as a manager, you see it as an important part of your role to develop the people that you've got working for you, then yeah, that should be something that kind of kicks in. And I think, you know, the more we can talk about that and highlight that, the importance that role plays, again, it kind of gets the message out.
Yeah.
And I think, though, does that come from that leader having that level of self-awareness about themselves, right? Because if you don't have that, then why would you even think about giving it to other people?
Yeah. Whereas Lenwood's situation, he was promoted, and you were expected to sink or swim by the sounds of it.
Yeah, well, it's very interesting because, you know, to Sarah's point, I came into the organization. I was, you know, a high performer, and you know, they just kind of assumed, maybe, I don't know if they assumed or what, but I think the leaders in the organization had higher expectations for how I would perform than I even had of myself. Like, I didn't, like I said, I didn't have an awareness of my own abilities and how I was able to contribute to the organization. Part of that was the person that I was working for, but also I lost the kind of natural opportunity to develop and have like a normal period of like, oops, and okay, I need to correct, because, you know, we had this tremendous pressure that came on the organization, you know, from internal and external pressures that it just put me in a hot seat that I wasn't really ready for.
So we come back to pressure, and one of the questions I was hoping we could ask Sarah today, with all of the growing pressures to deliver, what can we do to prevent burnout? How do we recognize the onset? And what can we do if burnout happens? Any thoughts there?
Sure. And I whenever asked about burnout, I always have to give my preface, which is it wouldn't be such an epidemic if I could just tell you 3 bullet points and we could solve it today. So
Fair.
we have to think about the systems in which we are working, the organizations in which we are working, and that context. I'll give an extreme example before I answer your question. We do a lot with health systems. Okay, so we work a lot with clinicians and non-clinicians and physicians. And so we can talk about individual changes and mindset and strategies, but we also have to acknowledge the healthcare system, policy, organizational change that is required. Okay, preface, end. And so, therefore, let me get to your question. First, I think it's really important for us to be thoughtful on what are we saying yes to, and therefore, what are we saying no to? No one should be surprised if you're saying yes to everything, that then lo and behold, you get overwhelmed. And therefore you start to feel some early signs of burnout, meaning like some emotional exhaustion. You don't have that same vigor, that same engagement in your work. There's a strong correlation to work engagement and burnout. Or there's actually some really interesting new research demonstrating cognitive load. It's out of actually NASA Task Index, demonstrating how those can be early signs of burnout. How much mentally are you doing, especially task switching? All of us are probably guilty of it, but the task switching is very exhausting to us humans. And so even strategies like batch work, Cal Newport does a lot of great work around having like your, again, periodization within your day of focused work and allowing yourself to have that, scheduling yourself to have that, and be thoughtful with your energy management around it. Gosh, I'm much better to do my analytical work in the morning versus the afternoon. The afternoon, I'm starting to feel a little wane. That's usually where I want to have like more of a coffee chat. Maybe I need to go for a walk. I've been really thoughtful about this, like working from home, thinking about 2 days a week, wanting to do in-persons. So I go out of my way. I think about this within the schedule, my weekly schedule, to have some of these different types of energy, different types of work. And so all's just to say, there's like basically paying attention to your energy management, your emotional exhaustion, the cognitive load, all of those things are important. A couple other things to consider. One, Brad Stolberg and Steve Magnus, they wrote this book, Peak Performance. They're advisors. Brad is an advisor to Valor. I love this kind of framework that they use around burnout: mastery, autonomy, belonging. What does that mean? Mastery. We as humans like to see that what we're doing is working towards something, especially when we're feeling outside of some things are outside of our control. But we like to see that, like, man, all of that work, but it wasn't for nothing.
Yeah.
I went from X to Y. And so we have to be thoughtful about that. As leaders, we have to be thoughtful about this for our teams, for our organizations, and being clear with our communication around mastery. Second is autonomy. You're hearing all the rage right now is about flexibility. Yeah, I want to be clear on the goals for my team, but when and how you do it, that's up to you. Or, man, this is the overall objective, right? So like classic OKR stuff, right? What do you think some good key results should be? Why don't you go think that through, come back with 3 recommendations or 3 ideas and your clear recommendation for how we could implement that. So giving that empowerment. Tracy said that word earlier, right? That's like thinking about the autonomy. People want to feel that autonomy at work. And then lastly, belonging. We are tribal creatures. We have to be thinking about the social connection and a sense of belonging, being a part of something. Like Leonard mentioned about he even still to this day remembers the mission. Mission can be a huge unifying force for us humans. So can values. But be thinking about the sense of belonging, the team that is working so hard. So those are just a couple of thoughts. Again, no panacea. Sorry. You can kick me off the show now.
Why do we have you here, really?
Exactly. And I'll wave my dragon wand and all will be well. Nobody will have burnout.
I want to acknowledge some of the comments. Rob Turrell, why do C-suite not get crisis management training anymore? This could perhaps stop burnout. And Matthew Lampy says, harking back to earlier comments on culture, creating and supporting cultures of coaching, mentoring, and individual development can build mental fitness and transform people and organizations. And then we also have Sean Matten. Empowerment is intimately linked to trust. Any thoughts around that?
Trust.
I have so many thoughts. Yeah, trust, psychological safety, all of those are so connected. I think those are great call outs. Matthew, yes, +1. And then I'll just say to Rob's point, interesting comment about crisis management. I would frankly say like adaptive leadership is now becoming all the rage these days, because what leader is not adapting? What leader is not having to navigate change? We've been nonstop, seems like, in crisis management mode. And you're inundated as a leader. So how do you make sure that you are grounded when everything around you seems like the ground may be shaking? How do you stay grounded? And that's the power of a lot of mindset and leadership coaching. But that's my plug.
So we're coming to the top of the hour. Before we do, any last thoughts from anyone on the panel? Any last questions?
I've got a question. So I don't think anybody could have listened to this and not be in agreement with how this conversation has gone and the challenges facing leaders and how they need to lead. So if you could give one top tip, Sarah, to something that anybody out there can do in terms of how they start to see with greater clarity how they can manage the interactions that they're having in order that they don't default to their weaknesses and start to put pressure on other people and all of those things. What would your one tip be?
So we've talked a lot about self-awareness, and that can be like this big giant word. It's like, how do I get self-aware? By the way, an HBR article said that 80% of leaders claim that they are self-aware. And I think we have all worked for people that were like, no, my friend, we're not. So I don't want to give something like be self-aware. Here's my tip. We call it the secret weapon at Valor. And it just starts with taking a breath. Sometimes we're in constant reacting mode. I myself, I'm a high, I love to go. And so my tip that I give to myself every day is take a breath, because there is a difference between reacting and intentionally responding. And sometimes all it takes is just that breath. So
is that the Sarah Bareilles song, Breathe? Just breathe.
There you go. Yes, that's the theme song for the Dungeons and Dragons.
There we go.
I think that's a great point. You know, and that's kind of what I was talking about. Is I would react rather than respond, and just taking that moment to not react but rather respond. It's a huge difference.
Yeah,
Awesome.
Brilliant. Thank you.
That is our time for the week. Sarah, before we go, how can our audience connect with you? Where can they find you?
All roads to Valor Performance will somehow find their way to me. So valorperform.com, or I'm on LinkedIn. So Sarah Milby, Valor Performance. You can find me, and I'd love to continue the conversation.
Sarah, check it out. We have something in common, which I didn't know.
What's that?
Check the Yale banner.
Oh, love it. Love it.
Awesome.
She went to Yale too, guys.
There you go. Well, as always, another great episode. I want to thank our audience for the active participation. I want to thank our panelists for your contributions to the show. And Sarah, thank you so much for your time. It's been great getting to know you a little bit more and learning from you. Until next week, this is the Digital Download signing off. Bye all.
See you later,
Bye,
everyone.